Hi, I'm Melissa Cobb. Come fly with AOPA. Well, this week we have some exciting news, a big milestone for the AOPA Sweepstakes Cessna 170. Let's check in with AOPA Sweepstakes Restoration Manager Caleb McLeod Hunt for the latest.
I'm greeted by a rainbow at my home airport, the Peach State Aerodrome. It's a big day here. The AOPA Sweepstakes Cessna 170B will fly for the first time with its new Continental Prime IO-370 195 horsepower engine and Hartzell Trailblazer propeller. Dave Stutz from Stutz Aviation and the team at Barnstormer's Workshop have spent many long days working on the airplane. After looking the airplane over a couple of times, we roll it over to the fuel pump and fill it up. Even though raindrops are falling here and there, the conditions are nearly perfect with little to no wind, high ceilings, and zero traffic in the pattern. Parker Thaxton, a close friend with nearly 1,000 hours in Cessna 170s, will be pilot in command on the first flight. He will be accompanied by Dave in the right seat. In front of a small crowd, Parker applies full power, and the 170 leaps off the ground in a way I have never seen the airplane take off before. It's at that moment that we all realize that this 170 is anything but the meek, underperforming tail dragger we once knew. It has been transformed into a real backcountry beast. Parker and Dave fly around for half an hour, testing out the engine install, climbing to around 3,000 feet before returning home to Peach State.
Hey, that'll do it.
So, Dave, Parker, how do you think the flight went today?
Went great. I had fun.
You're the pilot. What do you think?
Lots of power, lots of, torque, thrust, everything. It had it.
How do you think it went, Dave, from the maintenance standpoint?
Oh, it went great. Good install. That's straightforward. No problems. Everything's in the green. Look good.
Excellent. What sort of speeds were you cruising at, Parker?
I think we were at about 135 miles an hour or so.
And you guys have a 170. You have hundreds, probably 1,000 hours in your family Cessna 170. So how does that airplane compare to this 195 horsepower engine?
Yeah, it's like comparing a VW Bug to a drag car. It's completely different airplane. It's a lot of fun. I'm sure it'll do cool things.
Cool. Well, thank y'all so much for being a part of the project, and we'll see when we get to fly it next, hopefully soon, so stay tuned.
All right, so you're going to be able to check out the Sweepstakes 170 in person at Sun and Fun. It's going to be at the big AOPA tent at our display there. Walk all around, check out all the new mods, and also get a sneak peek at some of the other mods that we're going to be doing to the airplane. And I'll give you a little hint. One of those mods is that when we give the airplane away, it's going to have a fully IFR certified panel. So not only can you do a lot of fun backcountry flying in it, but you can also do IFR flying in it and shoot approaches down with the big iron. Now, if you want to make sure you're up to snuff on your IFR approaches, if you win the Sweepstakes 170, or for, in your regular flying, check out the AOPA Air Safety Institute's Beyond Proficient series. They just uploaded another video in their IFR series, and this one's on stabilized approaches. And they provide insights on how you can get your situational awareness, or as my family calls it, your SA, back if you've gotten a little bit disoriented or distracted in the clouds on the approach. And also how you can better handle task saturation. All right, let's switch to some serious news on the aircraft front. So the first one is actually from Continental Engines. They have released a mandatory service bulletin, and it's for newer engines, and the models are the 360, the 470, the 520, and the 550. Now, these are for engines that were manufactured between June 1st, 2021 and February 7th of this year. And what you need to do if your aircraft engine has less than 200 hours on it is that the crank assembly is going to need to be inspected. And the problem is that the counterweight retaining rings might not have been installed properly, and that could lead to engine failure. Now, this also applies to replacement crankshaft assemblies that were made during that same time frame, that June 2021 to February 2023 time frame. Now, because of this information from Continental, Cirrus last week actually made the decision to ground their own fleet of SR-22s and SR-22Ts that could be affected. So if your engine is affected, and actually you can check by serial number in the mandatory service bulletin. If it's affected, you'll see exactly what you need to do. We're going to drop a link to that down in the description below. Now, the other thing that is affecting aircraft is an airworthiness directive that the FAA recently issued for Cessna Centurions and Cessna Cardinals. And this AD was prompted by an in-flight breakup of a Cessna T210M in Australia. And the cause of that was fatigue cracking that started at a corrosion pit. So then as the FAA started doing more research, they started receiving a lot more reports of corrosion, specifically in the 210s and the Cardinals. And AOPA Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs, Chris Cooper, has been tracking this AD for years and the different changes in it. And he joins us now to shed a little bit of light on this subject. Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Alyssa.
So, Chris, what are the specifics of this AD and what do aircraft owners of these models, affected models, need to do?
Yeah, thanks for that. And as you mentioned, this AD deals with a lot of recent models of 210s, specifically the November through the Romeo series and the Cardinals, the 177 series. And this final AD matches up very similar to what the proposed AD that came out in 2021. And effectively, what it requires starting March 20th is the effective date, that within 200 hours time in service or within 12 calendar months, whichever occurs soonest, is that the owner-operator is going to need to do a visual inspection and an eddy current inspection of the carry-through lower spar, lower cap for any indications of cracking, corrosion, or damage. And depending on what's found is what's going to result in the specific actions that the AD will then warrant. And also there is a requirement for corrosion protection within 12 calendar months as well.
Are there any alternative means of compliance?
In short, yes. But the final AD actually doesn't provide any specific pathways for the AMOC, and what that means is that the FAA will definitely consider case-by-case proposals. So that might be alternative inspections, corrosion protection options, reliability-centered maintenance. Really, it's up to you, the owner-operator, to really propose to the FAA what that might look like. And so when if you think you have an alternative means that you can propose to the FAA, please reach out to your local FSDO to make that request.
And what has AOP been doing on behalf of aircraft owners?
Since 2020, when this first came to light and the first AD for earlier model 210s came out, AOPA has been very engaged with the 210 community. And when this proposed AD came out a couple of years ago that included newer models in the Cardinals, we reached out to the Cardinal community to kind of figure out what are the specific issues that they see with this AD. And with that, we did submit comments to the proposed AD requesting the applicability of that AD and to provide further flexibility for the owner-operators that are impacted by this AD. And we also did a survey not too long ago to figure out the availability of eddy current inspections and the costs and the accessibility of those inspections. Now, what we saw in the final AD, unfortunately, the FAA declined to reduce the applicability of that, but they did provide some flexibility that we requested for in the pathway of allowing for special flight permits under certain circumstances. So be sure you look at the AD very carefully. It is an interim AD, so there is potential for the future that there could be changes in the future.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris. And we really appreciate all your hard work on this and all the advocating that you do on the regulatory front for pilots and aircraft owners.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alyssa.
Well, we bring you another update from California. at Santa Clara County again with Reed Hillview Airports and the San Martin Airport. Recently, Santa Clara County and the FAA came to an understanding through a memorandum, and what this is going to allow is the county has agreed to address a lot of safety issues at the airports, and the FAA has agreed to hold its investigation into the county to pause it for basically 6 months to give them time to start fixing this a long list of safety issues that's been happening at those two airports. Now, this memorandum does not address AOPA's complaint about banning the sale of 100 low lead fuel and the safety implications that can have. So the county still has to respond to AOPA's complaint by February 28th, and ultimately the FAA is going to make a decision on whether the county is in violation of federal rules by banning the sale of 100 low lead. So that part is still to come. However, this memorandum does open the door for some FAA funding to be used to do a monitoring program for unleaded fuel at Reed Hillview Airport. So the saga continues out in California in efforts to try to get pilots some relief and to help improve safety at those airports. All right, well, let's just take a break away from all that news and get away to a slice of paradise. AOPA Pilot Editor at Large Dave Hirschman takes us to Nevis, an island in the Caribbean, and a beach barren.
The jagged outline of the volcanic island rising from the blue Caribbean is visible more than 50 miles away. Nevis is the birthplace of Alexander Hamilton. We've come to retrace his early footsteps.
We've all seen the play, watched the Disney movie, and now it's time to actually go there. And I'm so curious to see the place.
What do you find inspiring about Alexander Hamilton?
I just think he's one of the most. He had an amazing life story. He's one of the most insightful of the founding fathers, and the fact that his whole origin story is so unlikely. You know, I mean, a guy born out of wedlock at a tiny place in the Caribbean, that he would be this incredibly influential American. You know, in the early days, leader in the revolution. Just seems so far-fetched.
A rocky outcropping about a mile from the runway threshold requires a curving approach to final.
And 184 Mike Bravo's 2 mile final, runway 10.
November 184 Mike Bravo, clear to land, 10011.
Clear to land, 10, 184 Mike Bravo.
A steady trade wind is well aligned with the 4,000-foot strip, and the Barren, with its heavy load of people, gear, and fuel, rolls to a stop at midfield. We hop in a taxi and take in the beautiful sights of the island. Nevis was an economic battleground in the 17th century as the British, French, Danish, and Dutch fought for advantage in the Caribbean. Then as now, it was a place of surpassing natural beauty. Sugar drove the economy here, and the climate in Nevis was ideal for growing it. You can visit Hamilton's birthplace in Charlestown, a small town about 20 minutes from the airport.
Well, the Alexander Hamilton Museum and the Nevis History Museum are right here, and they're pretty small places. But hey, it's Nevis is a pretty small place, so that seems to suit. But this is where it all began in terms of Alexander Hamilton's remarkable life.
Hamilton was just a young boy in the late 1750s when he lived in Nevis with his parents and an older brother. But his experiences here shaped him and later young America. Fierce opposition to slavery, an activist central government, a diversified economy backed by a disciplined monetary policy, and free trade were ideas that took hold in his formative years. But his out-of-wedlock birth and tragedy-filled youth brought only stinging shame and embarrassment. Today, residents are more likely to admire local politicians or cricket stars than Hamilton. They say he was born here, but that's it. I keep hoping for Hamiltonian insights during our stay in Nevis, but they're elusive. Instead, I'm transfixed by the place. We ask a lifelong resident for a guided tour of the island. The sugar plantations that produced both riches and misery have been transformed into stunning high-end resorts and housing subdivisions. The last of the sugar plantations closed in the 1950s, and the donkeys that were beasts of burden now have their run of the island. There are fiery sunrises and sunsets with elaborate cloudscapes. The people we meet are spirited and friendly, and the mood is relaxed and welcoming. I can't help but wonder why Hamilton wouldn't claim such a place. Why wouldn't he identify with it and take pride in it? The inescapable answer is that Nevis today is nothing like the place where Hamilton knew such tragedy and loss. Despite his heavy load, the Baron lifts off gracefully from the east-facing runway at Nevis, and we begin our next overwater trek. Before we leave Nevis, however, I asked the tower controller for permission to overfly the runway at low altitude. I want to remember every sight and sensation of this spectacularly beautiful place before saying goodbye. That's quite a contrast from Hamilton, who, when he left here, was likely impatient to get away and establish himself in America. And he was more successful at that than anyone, himself included, would have predicted. Dave Hirschman, AOPA Pilot.
Wow, Dave, what an absolutely beautiful destination. Now, I know that you were actually doing a lot of intense flying, hitting several different Caribbean islands in a day in order to gather critical data for the AOPA Pilot Guides, the Bahamas and Caribbean editions, and also gathering for this video story and the feature in the Destinations issue of Pilot Magazine. But if pilots want to, fly from the U.S. mainland down to Nevis or any of the Caribbean islands, what type of aircraft should they have?
It's I'm in a hangar with an RV-12, a Cessna 182, and a Baron, and any of those airplanes can do it. I mean, if you want to island hop, the distances between land is less than 100 miles all the way down to South America, and the distances between Abgas is about 300 miles max.
Oh, okay. And I mean, any kind of special training that you recommend pilots have before embarking on this kind of a trip?
The runways are pretty long, in most of the places, but the trade winds are strong. So, some recent practice in flying in winds and maybe some crosswind practice would be beneficial.
Okay. And what about over water training, like any egress or? Yeah,
you practice your backstroke, your breaststroke. No, there are, there's the overwater portions can be pretty significant. We had a raft, in this airplane, PLBs. We were wearing, flotation devices. So, that is, the fact of being over water is very much top of mind.
So I know that our AOPA Pilot Guides are a helpful resource. Are there any other resources or services out there that you would recommend?
Yeah, there's two companies. There's CST Flight Services and Rick Gardner, who works closely with AOPA and AOPA members, and Air Journeys, based in Florida. And they both offer these. They have websites with really current information about those about the locations in the Caribbean. They offer what they call concierge services, where they basically act as your flight dispatcher, and then they have guided tours.
So you can use any of those options.
All right, great. Well, thanks, Dave. Appreciate all your advice and insights.
Well, thank you, Alyssa. Good to talk with you, and hope the rain clears up soon.
Thanks. Well, I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Fly with AOPA. Be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all our latest videos. And this week, we leave you with footage from Jeremy Noble, who's flying over the San Juan Islands in Washington State. Be sure to send in your favorite flying videos at the link in the description. You just might see them on an upcoming show. And as always, if you're not already an AOPA pilot, we'd love for you to join us. Click the link at the end of the video to learn more. We'll see you next week.